We've spent a lot of time this morning already talking about the debate over lockdowns and restrictions on businesses during the COVID-19 second wave that we are living through. But for a lot of businesses, we know the longer that goes on, the tougher it will be for them to survive. We've had conversations with players from the small business industry. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business has already estimated upwards of 160,000 businesses across the country could permanently close. They estimate the potential is that number could actually rise to 225,000. And there's also a large number of businesses that every day right now are simply losing money. We know that's not necessarily something that is sustainable, so a lot of entrepreneurs have to think differently these days. Michele Romanow is a well-known entrepreneur and someone who finances other entrepreneurs across the country as the co-founder of Clearbanc, and she joins us this morning. Michele, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you, John.
We went through some of the stats there. What are you hearing when you talk to different business owners across the country right now?
I think this is a really rough time for especially brick and mortar small businesses. Most people barely made it through the first wave, ended up putting a lot of additional debt on their businesses, and the second wave looks just catastrophic for many of these. I think really the only piece of hope here is that digital businesses are doing much better. So at Clearbanc, we've invested now over $1 billion in 3,300 different e-commerce companies. And because so many people are buying so many more things online, we're seeing that segment do well. So if you can take your brick and mortar business and somehow pivot it into digital, I think that is your fighting shot that you have today.
So that's a lot of money to put to work. And are you talking about businesses that are young and they're starting from day one on e-commerce, and businesses that have had to pivot and they're learning how on the fly to move into the world of e-commerce?
It is actually both. We've started with digitally native brands. Some of our companies are as young as 6 months old. Some of them are a decade old. But we're actually seeing more and more that people have to switch the way. You think about it, it's like that small shoe store in Duncan, BC. When they had to go into lockdown the first time, they actually had a great group of local customers that were completely willing to buy. Here's the bright spot, is that consumer spending has not dried up, right? What we've just seen is we've seen that behavior shift online. Like, as a percentage of retail sales, e-commerce has gone from 14% of retail sales to 28% of retail sales. And now that we've shifted so many of these buying habits, they're going to be permanent. People are now comfortable buying their food and groceries online. They're comfortable furnishing a house online. They're comfortable buying color cosmetics online. All sorts of spaces that we thought were going to take way longer to get online adoption. But I think if you are just brick and mortar, and if you are hoping that people will come in, it is going to be more and more difficult as restrictions keep being in place because of the virus.
You raise a good point. Us as consumers, we have easily adopted change. Well, we're happy to buy just about everywhere right now. We had the president of Shopify on the program last week, and he talked about resistant retailers. Now, mindset is important for entrepreneurs, and you spend a lot of time thinking about this. When someone is running into roadblocks, and maybe it's not that they don't want to change, it's just challenging to think about how you go about changing. How do you get over that resistance hurdle?
I think for me, I've always used this framework of whether I'm choosing to have a fixed mindset myself or a growth mindset myself. And a fixed mindset is everything your body, frankly, wants to feel. Why is this happening to me? What am I doing wrong? I don't deserve this. And a growth mindset is forcing myself, even at the toughest times as an entrepreneur, to ask myself the question, Michele, what is this teaching me? And what can I learn? And how can I change my mindset? And so, look, change is difficult for every single one of us. And I think there were people with, I saw one of my favorite restaurants in Toronto just close its doors. I almost cried. I didn't even think I could have that emotional attachment to a restaurant when I saw their Instagram post about that. But ultimately, what can this teach us? as entrepreneurs, and how can we use this moment to make our businesses more resilient, to learn a new skill. Our customers haven't gone away. And I think the other thing that entrepreneurs need to remember, John, is that their consumer has actually never been more forgiving, right? We are now willing to say we're all in this together. This is not going to be perfect. Something is not going to come in an hour anymore, because there is a lot of challenges. And so in many ways, it is a great time to engage your community. It is a great time to rally together, and it is a great time for you to change your mindset instead of why is this happening to me to what is this teaching me?
Yeah. Those are really helpful points. And the last thing I just wanted to zero in on is, I think what's tough for a lot of people is that when we're talking about government mandated shutdowns, it's just hard to get around that. It's one thing if you love being entrepreneurial and you go into it with a willingness to fail. It's another if you're literally being told you can't operate right now, and we're not sure when you're going to be able to operate again. So what's been your take on how the government has responded? And are there things they could be doing differently, whether it's moving faster to help these businesses or where they spend money?
Yeah, I think it's a really hard question to know what governments are doing. I think that it's really unfortunate we gave up on contact tracing. It looks like largely on Ontario. Helping us understand how and why this virus is spreading and where it's spreading is, a critical part of that. And I really do believe that, we need to be putting more funding into these small businesses, because, it's the backbone. I mean, this, small businesses, depending on how you measure it, is between 40 and 60% of our economy. And so these are the businesses that don't have the big cushions. They don't have access to, massive debt facilities. They don't have a lot of other options. And so I think, the government being really thoughtful about that is important. As we go through this area where you're 100% right, it feels very unfair. And so my advice to founders is, you got to pivot and you got to figure out how to find your customers online. Your customers haven't gone away. They have changed the way they've interacted with you. And then I'm really hopeful that the government will continue to provide more support to small businesses, because it is just devastating out there.
Helpful context. Hey, Michele, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
That's Michele Romanow, co-founder of Clearbanc, joining us with some entrepreneurial